Good news.
I'm on holiday from work.
This morning when I was late and my boss also texted me that he was late.
I might have a job. So that's some good news.
No, I don't have any. You go first. No, you've got good news.
I've had a lot of bad news lately.
I just got promoted. I'm the manager now, yay!
Friends being married.
It was my brother getting into university.
I'm quite loud, so I'll just shout it to everyone.
Facebook, Twitter. Yeah, but I don't normally share good news unless I'm asked.
Oh my God, guess what?
You know? Like that.
I messaged literally everybody I know in my life.
With my friends, it's usually food.
So people can celebrate with you, right?
Yeah.
Have you told anyone you're doing Alpha? Maybe you'd say, well, I'm not ready to tell anyone because I don't even know what I think. Or perhaps you're thinking, I've begun to experience something. But supposing someone asks you about it, what would you say? How would you explain it? And why would you even want to?
And sometimes even I struggle with that. I find it difficult to tell people that I go to church and sometimes feel a bit embarrassed about sharing my faith, and I don't know why. I suppose I just worry that people think that I'm going to be a bit weird or something, and sometimes people can freak out when you talk about what you believe. But the thing is, I know in my heart what I believe, so why am I so afraid? Why is it sometimes so hard to tell others?
I can remember before I was a Christian, I used to be really irritated by the Christians that I met who wanted to talk to me about their faith. It's like they were trying to convert me. I was an atheist. I wasn't trying to convert anybody to atheism. I couldn't understand why they couldn't just keep it to themselves. Sometimes people say, isn't faith just a private matter? Aren't the best kind of Christians the ones who live out their faith but don't talk about it? And everyone seems to have a kind of Uncle Norman, this perfect Christian who lives it out but doesn't talk about his faith. But the question I want to ask is, how did Uncle Norman become a Christian? Someone must have told him. And if the early Christians hadn't talked about their faith, we would never have heard. So why should we tell people about Jesus? First of all, because Jesus told us to. The word go appears in the Bible 1,514 times. Jesus was constantly saying to his disciples, go and tell, go and invite, go and make disciples. He's saying, I've come that you might have life, and life in all its fullness. Go and tell people the good news about me. And then there's the need of other people out there. It's an act of love to tell people this amazing news that Jesus brings us peace, a deep inner joy, fills our hearts with love, brings meaning and purpose to our lives, brings forgiveness, eternal life. I mean, this is amazing. It's like if you found water in a desert, an oasis. It would be really selfish just to take the water and drink it yourself and not tell your friends. You want to tell your friend, look, we found water. And it's natural to want to tell people, we found Jesus. And then it's such good news. The word gospel literally means good news. And when you hear good news, you want to tell other people. Good news travels fast.
I think that was your job was to call people once Henry was born. And I'd given you a list of all the people that you had to call.
I think you gave me a list of 10 people, didn't you?
Now probably you just put it on Facebook.
It was back in the old days where you had call boxes and you had to put in
Money.
10p pieces,
Yeah.
make the calls. So it was a bit more complicated. So I went off to to make the calls, and the first person I rang was Pippa's mother. I rang her and I said, it's good news, we've had a son. He weighs whatever, 12 pounds, 6 ounces.
7, 9.
Whatever it was. And then second person on the list was my mother.
Mm-hmm.
So I rang my mother. She was engaged. So then I went to, the next person was Pip's sister. And she said, "Oh, I've heard you've had a son. And you know, Henry." And I thought, that's strange. And they said, "My mother's just rung me." And I went to the next one, and they said, "Oh, you know, congratulations, I hear you've had a son." And I went down the list. They literally, someone had rung someone, so all the following calls they'd already heard. And when I eventually got through to my mum, she said that she'd already heard from Pippa's mother. So Pippa's mother had rung her, that's why she'd been engaged. I didn't need to say to Pippa's mother, "You must tell people." It was quite natural for her. Good news travels fast. When you hear good news, you want to tell people, and she had told people. When I encountered Jesus, I wanted to tell people. It was the most natural thing, I guess, is to want to tell people. But the way I went about it was not always very sensitive. And I remember very soon after I encountered Jesus, I went to a party and I was determined to tell the first person that I met there, that I knew about Jesus. And it so happened that the first person I saw who I knew was Pippa, who was on the dance floor. So I thought, right, I'm going to go and tell her about Jesus. And during the time, the 10 days that I've been a Christian, I've been to a talk on evangelism. And they said, if you want to tell people about Jesus, the first thing you need to do is establish the fact that the person needs Jesus. So I thought, right, I've got to go and establish the fact she needs Jesus. So I went straight up to her on the dance floor. I didn't want to waste any time with polite conversation. I just said, "Hello, Pippa, you look terrible. You really need Jesus." So that was insensitivity. And I think, if you go around like that, sooner or later you get hurt. And I swung from insensitivity to fear. I became very fearful even to mention the name Jesus. And I guess that's a lot of my life. I was looking for ways in which to communicate faith in a way that doesn't involve either insensitivity or fear.
We need to realize that telling others about Jesus arises naturally out of our own relationship with God. And ultimately our motivation is love. Love for God and love for other people.
And one way we can tell people about it without insensitivity is by our presence in the world. Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven."
My sister was about to get married, so she was doing this marriage preparation course at church, and she said, "Julia, do you want to come along to church one Sunday? I'm going anyway." And I kind of wrestled with my faith, and I was looking for answers and just was looking for those in the wrong places. And I thought, well, you know what, I'll go to church. And somebody prayed for me, and I just felt this real peace, like I'd sort of come home. And it just so happened that Alpha was kind of starting the following Wednesday. So I went on Alpha, and it wasn't a fast sort of journey, but just a strong week by week building, of rebuilding of my faith, really. And I think everything that I knew of God to be true kind of dropped from my head to my heart. A few years ago, I heard a talk all about human trafficking, and I knew nothing about it, didn't think that the buying and selling of human beings actually existed. And I just felt instantly this sort of horror that why didn't I know? As an educated girl, why did I not know about this? And so I really sort of said to God, okay, how can I serve you in this? How can I make a difference? Long story, but I ended up putting together a crew, and we wanted to be the fastest women ever to row the Atlantic Ocean, to retrace the transatlantic slave trade route and really